So, a couple of years ago, I painted our kitchen cabinets, and oh my gosh, what a transformation! And also, oh my gosh, so much work. So, when we were remodeling our dollhouse and I wanted to make the kitchen to match, I was like, okay, I'll make custom flooring. I will take the pattern off of our kitchen curtains and I will make custom wallpaper. But I'm going to buy the cabinets already made, which didn't quite work out. My house, my dolls, and these cabinets are all 1/12 scale, but they don't look right next to each other. So I thought, hey, I've already painted my kitchen cabinets. How hard can it be to do this again, but in miniature? I just need upper cabinets, a little stove and range, some lower cabinets, and a sink. I can totally do this. But since I'm building this from scratch, I'm going to start by making a paper template. I'm working in 1/12 scale, so when I saw that my base cabinets were about 1 3/4 feet deep, I made my base cabinets 1 3/4 inches deep. I also marked off features like the sink and the oven. Then I did the same thing on the upper cabinets. I see this is 30 inches or 2.5 feet tall, so I made my upper cabinets about 2.5 inches tall. But again, having it in a paper template lets me actually see it in the space and see if it makes sense visually. We're working a lot with proportion, and this kitchen in the dollhouse is a lot smaller than the footprint of my actual kitchen. Similarly, this mother doll is a hair under 5 inches tall, which would make her a hair under 5 feet tall in real life. And I don't think she wants to jump like a basketball player to access her upper cabinet. So maybe we need to bring those a little lower. I could make these upper cabinets 3.5 inches tall so that they come down a little bit closer to the counter height and look a little bit more normal and in proportion with the doll and with the kitchen. So now that I've got that accomplished, I can get started on actually making some of these things out of wood. Let's start with our lower cabinets. So, using my paper template as a guide, I went ahead and I measured out and cut out a lot of teeny tiny wooden pieces in this jumble right here. I helpfully marked some of them with counter and side, and now I'm going to assemble them. This looks a lot scarier than it actually is because when we're building, we always remember we just want to make a rectangle. We can make this whole thing just working with rectangles. Here's the back of our cabinets, two sides, and one front support. Boom, one rectangle. Here's our cabinet faces. I actually decided I wanted two sets of drawers on each side. I'm just making rectangles using my ruler to make sure everything is even, squaring it up as I glue and go along. Once it's dry, do your future self a favor. Go ahead and grab yourself, this is a little bottle cap of drywall mud and a toothpick, and I'm just going to caulk in some of these seams so that when I go to paint, it's not going to settle in those little seams. It's just going to look really smooth all the way around. And after that's dry, go ahead, give yourself some bonus points by sanding it too. And since I forgot to do this while I was cutting everything out, I'm going to take a minute while everything is still laying flat to snip out the shape of my drawer fronts. See how nice that lines up? Beautiful. Okay, so now I'm going to think about where I want my paint to go. On my actual cabinets, everything is kind of a plywood or it's probably veneer or something on the inside. I don't really want to paint the insides and the drawers and everything because it might stick. But I do want to use this paint on the drawer fronts, on the face of the cabinets, on the sides. So I'm going to get out my paintbrush and have a little me time just giving everything one or two coats. I did not use my cabinet paint on the front of this sort of front support beam because that's going to function as kind of the toe kick, at least under these drawer fronts. That's going to be the little area that sits back a ways from the cabinets, and I want that to be black. So I'm going to use a little bit of this black electrical tape, and I'm just going to put it under those sections where our drawers are going to be. Once that's attached, we're going to use our 3-in-1 beacon glue to attach the drawer front right there. Once again, I'm working in a rectangle, just putting a nice thin bead of glue along this side support, lining that up along the top edge, and then I'm going to get out our inner side support. This is going to remain plywood because it's going to face the oven, where the oven is going to go in the middle section. And I'm going to attach that with glue too. One more rectangle, everything is supported, square, and secure. Now let's add some supports for the drawers. I have some of this kind of a corner trim, and I'm going to put it on either side of each of these rectangles on the inside. I'm going to glue them in place, and then those will be the supports for a little plywood platform. I'll add a little bit of glue to make sure it's extra secure. And then I'll pop that right in. Okay, great. I'm going to do that 3 more times, and then we're going to build the drawers. So in 1/12 scale, we can see that each drawer is going to be about 1.5 inches wide. It's very similar to my kitchen drawers are about 18 inches wide. I want the outer dimensions of my drawer to be really close to the size of the opening. Not so close that it's going to be hard to maneuver it in and out of that spot, but close enough that it's not rattling from side to side. So I'm going to cut the bottom of my drawer to just a hair above that 1.5 inch mark. I'm also going to measure and make sure that the bottom of each drawer is just a hair under the depth of this little opening. That way, when it slides back, it can slide all the way to the back. But again, we're not going to have wasted space where teeny tiny spoons are going to get lost. So let's test this out. I like it. And now that I have my drawer bottoms, I'm going to go ahead and measure and cut the sides of my drawer. Originally, I had figured that I would make my base cabinets with sort of a shallow drawer at the top and then a more spacious cabinet underneath. However, then I was thinking about it, and from a practical standpoint, 2 deeper drawers on either side of the oven just make a lot more sense for dollhouse storage. It will be so much easier to pop out a whole drawer, look at what's inside, rearrange it, than it would be to try and get your knuckles all the way into these really deep cabinets or to manage these really shallow drawers. So I decided to make 2 1-inch deep drawers on either side of the oven. I happen to have these popsicle sticks that are 1 inch wide, so I just use those. And my miter shears make pretty quick work of cutting those sides so that they're at a perfect 90-degree angle from the bottom. Not going to lie, the idea of squaring up all the corners involved in making teeny tiny drawers so that none of them are lopsided or that they won't get stuck in these openings was a little intimidating. But don't forget, we always just go back to making a rectangle. So I have my drawer bottom, and now I'm going to attach both sides. And while those are starting to dry, I'm going to use a little bit of painter's tape to secure them. I overlap that painter's tape to make kind of a fourth side of the rectangle so that things are drying at approximately a 90-degree angle. Now I'm preparing the remaining 2 sides of the drawer, and I'm running a thin bead of glue around either edge as well as the bottom. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. When you stick these on, now we've glued all the way around the drawer bottom and also all the way up each side of the drawers. Everything is square, everything looks terrific, and now we can move on to our decorative drawer fronts. My kitchen drawers have kind of this louvered edge detail, which I made by layering 2 sizes of popsicle stick. And when I cut them and painted them, they also give that look of having a raised panel. Now I'm going to glue those decorative painted drawer fronts onto the plain drawers. I'm doing this while the drawers are in each opening just so I can make sure that the drawer fronts are symmetrical with each other and it's going to be a nice finished look. If you're wondering about this blank spot to the top right, that is where our sink is going to go. So I am going to use this drawer front as a little tilt out. First, let's make some little drawer pulls out of googly eyes. Yes, I am serious. I happen to have several sizes. One is too small, that one's too big, but Goldilocks here is just right. So we're going to get 2 of those, and we're going to split them in half to make 4 of these cup handles. We'll use just regular black acrylic paint to paint the outside. Are you starting to see the vision? And for stability, we don't cut off the back. We are just going to paint it to match the cabinet there. And that gives us more surface area to glue onto these drawer fronts. Give the back a healthy dab of your craft glue, super glue, or maybe even hot glue would even work for this application too. And then just line it up down the middle. I just eyeballed it. I didn't bother measuring this part. I just want to make sure that they look straight and that they align with each other. Looking good. And with those handles finished, let's get ready to make that tilt-out drawer. Turning this little false drawer front into a tilt-out under my sink is one of my favorite life-size DIYs. So obviously we have to do this in the miniature kitchen. I have my drawer front here and I'm tracing a piece of popsicle stick to the same width. And because this popsicle stick bit is taller than the opening, that way when I tilt it in and out, it's not going to fall all the way through the opening, for example. It's going to kind of catch on the upper edge of the opening. And then I'm going to use a slightly narrower piece of popsicle stick, one that easily fits inside the opening. See, like that? I'm going to use that for the sides. And to make this a true tilt-out drawer, I'm going to cut this as a triangle. So that's what it will be like when it's shut. And then when I tilt it forward, it will tilt out just about a 45-degree angle. So let's go ahead and trim that and assemble. I'm going to attach this rectangle of plywood to the actual drawer front, and then this larger one will obviously be the back, and these 2 triangles will form the sides. So here it is all glued together and glued onto the drawer front. I'm just dry fitting it in the opening to make sure that the drawer front is lined up, and when it opens, the back prevents it from going all the way through. So now let's go ahead and make this permanent by attaching a little bit of a fabric hinge. I'm just going to cut my fabric, just a very thin piece, like so. And then I'm going to glue on the bottom back side of our tilt out. Attach 1/2 of the fabric there and just press down and let that dry just a little bit. And then on the inside, I'm going to slide it in, open it up like so. Make sure that everything is aligned, and then I'm going to glue the fabric down to the bottom of that little shelf that I made. There we go, and that will keep it so that it's centered. The tall backside will keep it from falling all the way forward, but it's still a little front heavy, so I'm going to glue a washer just to weigh down the back side so that it will only open when we want it to and not just fall open. And now here we go. As you can see, if I open it, it comes open just enough, but then it's heavy enough to slide right back. Now it's time for counters and installing the oven. I actually made another video detailing how I made the oven, but what's relevant for us is that we're going to be clipping this support beam that's been holding these cabinets steady. If you remember, that's the first way we formed a rectangle to make sure that everything would be square. I'm going to reuse this support beam to be the little control panel, and then I'm going to still keep everything steady and square by adding a lot of glue and gluing this oven into place. There we go. And now that that's installed, we can move on to the counters. I'm just going to run some craft glue around the edges here so that I can put in my little plywood counter. And then let's talk about how we're going to finish it off. My first thought was to use some of this kind of brown stone looking scrapbook paper that looks a little bit more like my real life countertops, but I just don't love the look of that. So I got rid of it and I decided to use some marble contact paper instead. I just trimmed it to size and very carefully smoothed all the way around the edges. The hard part about contact paper is that it tends to bubble up a little bit. So I used a washer to smooth it down. You could also use a credit card or any kind of straight edge for that. And now we'll do the other side so you can see how I did the sink. So here's our plywood counter, and I want my sink. Ideally, I would have loved it to be in the middle of that counter space, but that's a lot of wasted space. So I instead decided to cut out around this back edge so it would sit like that. And in order to make that measurement, I did not do any fancy math. I saw how the bottom of the container was just slightly smaller than this upper lip of the container. And I picked a measurement in between the two of those and snipped until it fit inside neatly. That's it. This was not a highly mathematical pursuit. Then, when I went and installed my marble contact paper, I took some scissors and just snipped a little bit around the corners so that when my sink went inside, it would fit in neatly, but also so that there wouldn't be a gap in between the marble contact paper counter and the lip of the sink. All right, looking good. For the sink, I'm actually using an empty jelly packet, and for the faucet, I had this left over from another project. So I just thought that I would hot glue it into place and it would look just as good as a real kitchen sink. Now, this is where I started to go off the rails once the hot glue came out. If you notice on the bottom of my jelly packet sink there, it's got a little bit of printing, and I wanted to cover that up. So I added a little sequin for a drain, and then I thought, wouldn't it be cute if I filled it up with hot glue to look kind of like water? Very cute until it melted. So, and that was my only jam packet. So thankfully, my knight in shining armor came riding to the rescue. My husband stopped by the Silver Diner on his way home and brought me a new jam packet. I ate 2 tablespoons of jam with my snack that day, and I remembered this time to install with only my craft glue. Crisis averted. That looks super cute. I still did a little sequin on the bottom, and turns out I don't care about the writing so much anymore because look how cute this base cabinet turned out. We're going to celebrate our success by going back to square one and making the upper cabinets from scratch. So just as a reminder, since we are back with our paper template, we are working on 1/12 scale. So 1 inch in my dollhouse is going to represent 1 foot in real life. And I just happen to have some of these popsicle sticks that are 1 inch wide. So I'm going to use that for the bulk of my lumber, if you will. I did decide to go ahead and extend these upper cabinets so they would be 3.5 inches high, representing about 3.5 feet. And for our middle sections, it's, as you can see, it's a little shorter in the middle. So those sides are going to be about 2 inches, representing about 2 feet. And each of these cabinets are going to be about 2 inches wide. So I'm going to make lots and lots and lots of tiny shelves, as well as the tops and bottoms of each cabinet section, all 2 inches by 1 inch, so 1 foot by 2 foot. My miter shears are doing a great job once again of cutting everything cleanly and at a nice right angle. So now it's going to be time to go ahead and start constructing rectangles. You can see here that I'm working on these sort of long cabinet sections that will go on either side. They have about 3 shelves, about 1 inch apart. So I'm using additional sections to form the spacer and also double as the backing. Then, when I glue on the 3.5 inch sides on either side, that's going to complete our rectangle. I'm going to paint these white, just like with our base cabinets. I'm not painting the insides of the cabinets. I don't want them to get sticky or have a hard time opening or shutting the doors. So I'm only painting the outer panels with my white paint. And as with all white painted projects, it takes like 2 or 3 coats to really get some good coverage. I'm also going to go ahead and sand. This is 120 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to sand off the edges a little bit so that as they're showing at the tops and bottoms of the cabinets, we're not going to have any little splintery looks. It's just going to be nice and smooth. And with that step completed, I can finally glue on these sides. You can see I'm using some spare bits of this 1 inch wide popsicle stick to hold the shelves at exactly a 90-degree angle while it dries. I'm also having a little section at the top and the bottom of the upper cabinets where there's just a little bit of extra space, and that's what's going to hold our face framing sections. Now I'm building another rectangle. This is going to be for our 2 inch tall middle cabinets. You can see I'm using a ruler and my existing cabinets to line it up, make sure everything's 90 degrees, and slide in this middle shelf, which also gives us a little extra support. Now it's time to add the cabinet face. So I'm using coffee stirrers here, and I'm going to cut out our left and right sides and then our tops and our bottoms. This is a little bit finicky, but better to do it now than once you have paint and glue all over your hands. So I'm just dry fitting this to see that I like it. And once I'm satisfied with the fit, I'm going to cut my remaining pieces, paint those white, and then glue them in place using my 3-in-1 craft glue. You can see how this little extra space at the top and bottom just actually even adds a little extra support for our top and bottom frames. Once you get the hang of it, I think this is really relaxing. It's like putting together a 3D puzzle, kind of. So I'll do this at night sometimes when I'm watching TV. And our last step is just as with our base cabinets, we're going to use a little bottle cap full of drywall mud to caulk in these corners and these seams where our face frame meets our cabinet box. That way, when we go over with another layer of paint later, everything will be smooth and finished and give it a really nice polished look. While that's drying, we can go ahead and work on our cabinet doors. So in order to make my cabinet doors look as realistic as possible, I'm going to want to build a little frame that will go all the way around the outer edge of each door. And I'm going to do this using some more of my coffee stirrers. I looked through and found the straightest ones. Some of them can be a little bit curved. And we're simply going to measure the side of each door as well as the width of each door. And we'll use our miter shears to miter the edges so that they meet at a 45-degree angle. So here I have my miter shears. I'm just going to turn this knob until it says 45, just like that. And then I'm going to take one of my coffee stir sticks and line it up right there against the rod. So you see when I clip it, it's going to come at this perfect 45-degree angle. Okay, so the longer of those two sides now, I want to line up with the two. And then I'm going to make my next cut so that the longest edge will be at this mark here where the 0 is. That's how I know that my miter will fit, so that the long edges are all the way around the outside and they come at a 45-degree angle inwards. Might be easier to understand if you see it rather than if I explain it. Here we go. See how I'm angling it so that the longer side is on the same side of the stick. There we go. And the shorter end is towards the inside. Now we're going to set those out and everything should meet perfectly. And that's how you make a cute little border for each of your cabinet doors. Once I'm happy with the placement, we just need to paint and glue, and then we'll be ready to attach with our fabric hinges. So there are a lot of ways to hang miniature doors, but my favorite really is fabric hinges. I feel like they tend to hang straighter. They don't get gummy like duct tape hinges will, and just overall, I think it makes a really nice finished look if you can match your fabric to the finish of the inside of your cabinets. So I have some white fabric here, and I'm just cutting a long, thin strip that's approximately the same length as the side of my door. And then I'm going to get some of my craft glue, my 3-in-1 glue, and I am going to run a nice thin bead of glue down the side that I want to be attached to the hinge. I'm going to press that on very, very tightly so there's not gobs of glue or anything, so it will dry very flat. And you see I have just about a 16th of an inch, maybe an eighth of an inch of fabric hanging over. That is what's going to attach to my face frames eventually. So I'm going to repeat this process on each of the doors, and then, very important, I'm going to let it dry completely. And while we're waiting on those to dry, we can go ahead and work on our cabinet knobs. For my cabinet knobs, I'm going to use some map pins. These are from my GeoJango travel map. And while the pin heads are the right shape and color, unfortunately the pins themselves are just a little bit too long for my cabinet doors. So let's fix that. I am going to do this in the, well, kind of safely by taping the ends of the pins onto this bit of blue painter's tape. I'm going to fold the end of the tape up over so that it covers all of these sharp ends. And then I'm going to use my wire cutters to snip the pins pretty close to where the heads are. There we go, nice and short. And then I'm going to use I really don't know what this is called. It's a little stabby thing from the miniature electric kit that I got, that's used for making holes to put the brads in through the copper tape. I find it very useful for all kinds of miniature things. So I just use it to drill very tiny holes. And here I am pushing in my pin all the way through. And where I still have a little bit of pin sticking up, I'm just going to bend it upwards. I'm also going to use the other side of the pin and drive it into the top corner. And then I can add some magnetic closures. I have a set of these small 2 millimeter magnets, and I like to use them for closing furniture. I am actually going to glue them on the inside of the cabinet, so kind of underneath this face frame here, and it will have just enough magnetic pull that when the cabinet door is already closed, it will help to keep it closed. I don't really want a stronger magnet, because a lot of my kitchen items tend to be made of metal or die cast metal. Now, if that wasn't the case and I wanted a really strong magnetic closure, I probably would have drilled holes into the face frames themselves and even into the cabinet doors themselves and inset these magnets. But for our purposes, this is fine. And now I can go ahead and glue on the other half of the hinges. So no notes on this really, except I'm going to have another fine little layer of glue on the other half of the fabric hinge, which I will then lay on to the face frame. And then I'm going to use a piece of this scrap plastic in between. So I'm going to have it dry folded over, and that will help our hinges stiffen a little bit so that they are more likely to close and stay in place. And my magnets are helping just a little bit to help keep everything straight and aligned while it's drying. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat that with each of these cabinets. You can see I'm adding the magnets in here and gluing on the hinges. Again, I have positioned these magnets so that they will be pretty weak, but they're already working for my purposes by holding the doors in place once I've adjusted them so I know exactly where I want them to hang. But when I go to prepare these to go on the wall, I'm going to use museum wax. This is a really handy little substance that I also use on a lot of miniature furniture. And you just take a little dab of this very clear wax. Here it is, clear museum gel. And people use this even for in antique stores and things like that if they want to secure some glasses onto a shelf or something else that's delicate and breakable, because it is so easy to secure and so easy to remove. It isn't going to leave any residue on my freshly painted cabinets. I'm demonstrating this on the cabinet I built for above the refrigerator. I actually made a short to show that process. But see, now once I have that museum wax on, even when I tilt the whole cabinet, it doesn't fall open unless I specifically tug on it. And that's exactly what I want. So now we are ready to install. I've tried a variety of glues for installing built-ins and cabinets in this dollhouse, and hot glue is really the best. So I just put a really generous amount of it on here. Again, we're starting with this cabinet that's meant to go above the refrigerator. The refrigerator is not glued against the wall because I think it's easier to play with if you can pull the refrigerator straight out and just get out the teeny tiny food and arrange things like that. But by having the refrigerator cabinet secured to the wall on top, it gives it a way to kind of lock in. And that's very useful too. So just hold it like that, just like you're, I don't know, holding on a command strip or something. You can see the refrigerator can still be pulled out if needed, but that cabinet is secured on really tightly. So we are going to repeat that process again with our other wall cabinets. Here is our base cabinet. And again, I am just securing it. It's not as necessary to use a lot of glue since this is going to be sitting on the floor, not hanging on a wall. But I'm still pretty generous here with the hot glue and I just very quickly press it against my wall, hold it still for a few minutes. And that becomes important when I go to line up the wall cabinet. I want the wall cabinet to be centered right above it, and I also want it to be level. The top edge of it, I want to be level with the top of the cabinet that's above the refrigerator. So that's going to take some quick work. I'm going to dry fit it first. I'm just going to line it up and get kind of an idea of where I'm going to want it to end up. This is where having gingham wallpaper is kind of helpful because I can see which squares I want it to line up on. And then I'm going to take it off. I have my hot glue gun all ready, and I am going to, as quickly as possible, apply as much glue as possible around the whole back of this. And now where I put it is where it's going to stay for probably the rest of time. So I'm going to quickly line it up where I had it earlier, press it down. Too late for regrets. So I am fully committing, pressing it in place. And when I take off my hand, everything will be fully installed. This is my first glimpse of everything all installed. I'm going to add a little bit of museum wax here to close these doors real quick. But I'm already loving it. And this is how I felt when I finished my full-size kitchen. It was so much work. And yet at the end, when I step back and look at it, I'm like, that was worth it. I'm glad that I did that. Literally just need another moment to back away and look at it. This is really motivating me to complete some more of my projects in this little dollhouse. And if this is the kind of project that interests you, I hope that you will subscribe so that you can join me again next time. And thank you for watching as we transformed our full-size kitchen into a miniature replica.